What if I told you that some of Hollywood's biggest legends didn't retire by choice, but were literally chased out of town by scandals so explosive they could never return? Behind the golden gates of Tinseltown lies a graveyard of careers destroyed not by age or lack of talent, but by secrets too dark for the studio system to survive. Number 15, Fatty Arbuckle. The king of silent comedy became Hollywood's first major casualty when a wild party went horribly wrong, creating the blueprint for celebrity destruction that still exists today. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle was pulling in millions and had just signed the biggest contract in film history, worth $3 million over 3 years, when actress Virginia Rappe died at his San Francisco hotel bash in 1921. The press painted him as a monster who crushed the young woman to death with his 300-pound frame, though medical evidence suggested she died from a botched abortion and chronic health issues completely unrelated to Arbuckle. The media circus was unprecedented, with newspapers selling millions of copies by printing increasingly lurid details about the party. William Randolph Hearst's papers led the charge, calling Arbuckle a beast and demanding his head on a platter. 3 trials later, he was acquitted and even received a rare written apology from the jury stating, "We feel that a great injustice has been done to him, but the damage was irreversible." Will Hayes, Hollywood's new moral watchdog, banned Arbuckle from the screen indefinitely, making him the first casualty of organized censorship. The comedian who once commanded $1,000 a day was forced to direct under fake names like William B. Good just to survive. Buster Keaton later revealed that Arbuckle was completely innocent, calling the whole affair the biggest frame-up in Hollywood history. The scandal didn't just destroy one man, it created the censorship system that would control movies for decades. Arbuckle died broken forgotten in 1933, weighing just 140 pounds, a shadow of the entertainer who once made America laugh. His final words were reportedly about wanting to make one more picture. Number 14, Charlie Chaplin. The little tramp's greatest enemy wasn't poverty or oppression, but his own mouth during the Red Scare that turned America's beloved clown into public enemy number 1. Charlie Chaplin never became an American citizen despite living in Hollywood for over 30 years, and when McCarthyism gripped the nation in the late 1940s, his leftist political views and criticism of capitalism made him a prime target. The FBI had been watching him since 1922, building a file over 1,900 pages thick that detailed everything from his political activities to his romantic relationships with much younger women. J. Edgar Hoover personally despised Chaplin, calling him a parlor pink, and worse, believing the comedian was using his films to spread communist propaganda. The pressure intensified when Chaplin refused to support America's entry into World War II and later criticized the atomic bombing of Japan. Politicians and newspaper columnists began calling for his deportation, with Senator Harry Kane declaring him an unwelcome guest who should be thrown out of the country. When Chaplin sailed to London for the premiere of Limelight in 1952, Attorney General James McGranary revoked his re-entry permit while he was literally on the ocean. The message was clear: don't come back. Chaplin was essentially exiled from the country that made him rich and famous, losing access to his films, his studios, and millions in frozen assets. He settled in Switzerland with his wife, Una O'Neill, daughter of playwright Eugene O'Neill, and declared he was fed up with America's insults and moral pomposity. Hollywood wouldn't properly welcome him back until 1972, when he received an honorary Oscar and a 12-minute standing ovation that brought the tough old comedian to tears. By then, he was 83 years old, and his legendary career was essentially over. The communist witch hunt had claimed its most famous victim, proving that even genius couldn't protect you from political paranoia. Number 13, Ingrid Bergman. America's sweetheart became America's most hated woman overnight when she abandoned her family for Italian love, creating a scandal that redefined moral expectations for female stars. Ingrid Bergman was Hollywood royalty in 1949, the pure and wholesome star of Casablanca and Notorious, who represented everything decent about American womanhood when she shocked the world by leaving her husband and daughter to live with Italian director Roberto Rossellini. Then she had his baby while still legally married to someone else, turning a career scandal into a moral crisis. The backlash was swift and merciless, unlike anything seen before or since. Senator Edwin Johnson called her a powerful influence for evil on the Senate floor and suggested she be barred from ever returning to America. Theater owners across the country refused to show her films, with some burning her promotional materials in public ceremonies. Fan magazines that once celebrated her beauty now burned her pictures and published articles about the fall of St. Ingrid. Hedda Hopper, the most powerful gossip columnist in Hollywood, led a personal crusade against her, writing, "Many American women have been wondering how Ingrid Bergman could so easily have walked out on her child." The Catholic Church condemned her from pulpits nationwide, and angry mothers organized boycotts of any theater showing her films. RKO canceled her contract immediately, costing her millions in guaranteed income. Bergman was effectively blacklisted from Hollywood for 7 years, becoming the most famous exile in film history. She made films in Europe, but couldn't return to America without facing arrest warrants and public humiliation. Her comeback in Anastasia in 1956 earned her a second Oscar, but she had to accept it through a representative because she was still afraid to show her face in Hollywood. The woman who once embodied American values had become living proof that the studio system would destroy anyone who dared to live authentically. Number 12. Jean Harlo. The original blonde bombshell's life was cut short not just by kidney disease, but by a scandal involving Christian Science and medical neglect that horrified Hollywood's elite and changed how studios handled star emergencies. Jean Harlo was MGM's Platinum Goddess in 1937, the woman who made peroxide hair a worldwide obsession and redefined screen sensuality when she collapsed on the set of Saratoga with severe abdominal pain. Her mother, a fanatical Christian Scientist named Mama Jean, refused to let doctors treat her daughter's obvious kidney failure, believing prayer alone would heal her condition. For 9 agonizing days, Harlo suffered in her Beverly Hills home while her mother and stepfather prevented any medical intervention. William Powell, her fiancé and co-star, begged MGM executives to override the family and force treatment, but studio lawyers were afraid of the legal complications. Clark Gable, her close friend and frequent co-star, was reportedly seen crying in his dressing room, knowing she was dying unnecessarily while doctors stood helplessly outside her bedroom door. The studio sent their own physician to examine her secretly, and he was shocked by what he found. Harlo's kidneys had completely failed, her body was swollen with toxins, and she was delirious with fever. When doctors were finally allowed to see her officially, it was too late. She died at just 26, her kidneys completely destroyed by what should have been a treatable condition. The studio covered up the religious angle, claiming she died of influenza, but insiders knew the truth and were appalled. The scandal quietly destroyed her mother's reputation in Hollywood circles and sparked nationwide debates about religious freedom versus medical responsibility. Harlo's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a preventable murder by faith that shook Hollywood's faith in studio control. Her final film, Saratoga, had to be completed using a body double, making her death eerily prophetic. The blonde bombshell had literally died for her mother's beliefs. Number 11. Robert Mitchum. The ultimate cool guy's reputation was nearly destroyed when he became Hollywood's most famous marijuana bust, creating the first modern celebrity drug scandal that almost ended his career before it really began. Robert Mitchum was riding high in 1948, building his image as the laid-back rebel who didn't care about Hollywood rules, when police raided a party at actress Lila Leeds' house on Ridpath Drive. They found Mitchum, Leeds, and 2 others sharing what newspapers coyly called Tea Party cigarettes in a scandal that made international headlines and shocked conservative America. The arrest photos showed Mitchum grinning and making jokes, which only made the conservative press angrier. He treated the whole thing like a publicity stunt, telling reporters, "Well, this is the bitter end of everything, including my career." Hedda Hopper declared his career over, writing, "The fans who make our stars will not tolerate their indulgence in marijuana." RKO Studios considered dropping his contract immediately, and dozens of theater owners announced they would boycott his films. Mitchum served 50 days on a prison farm in Castaic, where he worked in the kitchen and reportedly entertained fellow inmates with stories about Hollywood. He later joked that it was like Palm Springs but without the riffraff, maintaining his cool image even behind bars. The press coverage was relentless, with photographers camping outside the prison and reporters interviewing everyone who had ever met him. The shocking twist came decades later when it was revealed the whole bust was a setup orchestrated by a corrupt police detective looking to make headlines and advance his career. Mitchum had been framed by the very system that was supposed to protect him. But in 1948, the damage was real and potentially career-ending. He spent months rebuilding his reputation and proving he wasn't just another Hollywood druggie. His defiant attitude during the trial actually helped create his lasting image as the ultimate anti-establishment star who refused to bow to public pressure. Number 10. Errol Flynn. The swashbuckling hero of The Adventures of Robin Hood became the villain in his own life story when two teenage girls accused him of statutory charges in 1942, creating the most sensational trial of the decade. Errol Flynn was Hollywood's ultimate adventure star, the man who made sword fighting and daring-do look effortless, when Betty Hansen and Peggy Satterley claimed he had taken advantage of them at separate parties on his yacht, Sirocco. The accusations turned Flynn from hero to predator overnight, destroying his carefully crafted image as a romantic leading man. The trial became a media circus that lasted 6 weeks and dominated headlines worldwide, with reporters calling it the trial of the century. Flynn's reputation as a hard-drinking playboy worked against him, and prosecutors painted him as a predator who used his fame to exploit young women. The courtroom was packed daily with fans and curiosity seekers, while photographers camped outside, hoping to catch Flynn looking guilty. His lawyer, the legendary Jerry Giesler, fought back by questioning the girls' credibility and suggesting they were seeking money and attention. The testimony was graphic and disturbing, with details about Flynn's yacht parties and alleged encounters that shocked 1940s sensibilities. Warner Brothers executives watched nervously as their biggest star faced potential prison time and the complete destruction of his career. The studio had millions invested in upcoming Flynn pictures, and his conviction would have cost them a fortune. Flynn was acquitted on all charges after the jury deliberated for 13 hours, but the phrase "in like Flynn" took on a sinister new meaning. The trial revealed embarrassing details about Hollywood's party culture and Flynn's wild lifestyle, including his relationships and heavy drinking. Warner Brothers considered dropping him, and several films were delayed or canceled. Though he kept working until his death in 1959, Flynn never fully escaped the shadow of the trial. His autobiography, published posthumously, hinted that Hollywood's golden boy was more damaged by fame than anyone realized. Number 9. Frances Farmer. The promising actress who challenged Hollywood's system was systematically destroyed by family betrayal and institutional abuse that reads like a horror story, torn from the pages of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Frances Farmer was a brilliant, outspoken woman who refused to play by studio rules, criticizing Hollywood's superficiality and expressing radical political views that made studio executives nervous. Her intelligence and independence threatened the system, and when her career stalled and personal problems mounted, her own mother had her committed to a mental institution in 1944. What followed was 8 years of hell that broke Farmer's spirit and ended her career before she turned 40. She endured brutal treatments, including insulin shock therapy, hydrotherapy, and possibly even a lobotomy, though doctors later denied performing the procedure. Former patients and nurses described seeing her restrained with leather straps, medicated into a zombie-like state, and forced to perform menial labor like scrubbing floors and washing dishes for pennies a day. The most chilling part was that much of her treatment was unnecessary and motivated by revenge rather than medical need. Modern psychiatrists who reviewed her case believe she suffered from bipolar disorder, which could have been managed with proper medication and therapy. Instead, she was tortured for nearly a decade because she dared to speak her mind in an industry that demanded total conformity from its female stars. When she tried to escape, she was dragged back and punished with even harsher treatments. Hospital records show she was given experimental drugs and subjected to procedures that would be considered torture by today's standards. When Farmer was finally released in 1950, she was a broken woman who never fully recovered her acting abilities or her sanity. Her story became a cautionary tale about what happened to stars who refused to submit to studio control. The beautiful rebel who once challenged Hollywood had been lobotomized into submission. Number 8. Lana Turner. The sweater girl's perfect life exploded into tabloid gold when her teenage daughter stabbed her mobster boyfriend to death in their Beverly Hills home, creating the most sensational murder case in Hollywood history. Lana Turner was Hollywood royalty in 1958, the glamorous star who had survived multiple marriages and scandals when her relationship with Johnny Stompanato turned deadly. The small-time hood connected to Mickey Cohen's crime syndicate had been threatening Turner and terrifying her 14-year-old daughter, Cheryl Crane, with his violent outbursts and possessive behavior. Stompanato was obsessively jealous and had been stalking Turner for months, showing up uninvited at her home and film sets. On April 4th, 1958, he exploded into another rage, threatening to kill Turner and disfigure her face so no one would ever want to look at her again. Crane grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter and plunged it into Stompanato's stomach during the fight. Turner found her daughter standing over the body saying, "I killed him, Mom. He was going to hurt you." The subsequent investigation and trial became the biggest Hollywood scandal of the decade, with Turner sobbing on the witness stand while describing the abusive relationship in graphic detail. Newspapers called it a soap opera playing out in real time, and the courthouse was mobbed by reporters and photographers from around the world. The testimony revealed disturbing details about Stompanato's threats and Turner's fear for her life and her daughter's safety. Crane was ruled to have acted in justifiable homicide, but conspiracy theories swirled for decades. Some believed Turner actually killed Stompanato, and her daughter took the blame to protect her. Others suggested the mob was involved in a cover-up to silence Stompanato before he could reveal secrets about Mickey Cohen's operations. What's certain is that Turner's career never recovered from the publicity circus. The glamorous star became associated with violence and organized crime, and family-friendly films were no longer an option. She spent her remaining years playing desperate women in increasingly melodramatic roles, forever haunted by one night of violence. Number 7. Peg Antwistle. The tragic blonde who became Hollywood's ultimate symbol of broken dreams took her own life by jumping from the famous Hollywood sign itself, creating the most poetic and heartbreaking exit in entertainment history. Peg Antwistle was a talented stage actress who came to Hollywood in 1932 with high hopes and serious credentials, having appeared on Broadway in prestigious productions and in London's West End. She was beautiful, intelligent, and experienced, everything Hollywood claimed to want, but the system chewed her up and spat her out in less than a year. She landed a small role in 13 Women with Irene Dunne, but was devastated when RKO decided not to renew her contract, and most of her scenes were cut from the final film. The part that was supposed to launch her movie career became a humiliating footnote, and other studios showed no interest in signing the unknown actress. Facing financial ruin and career disappointment, she moved into a cheap apartment and watched her savings disappear while sending desperate letters to agents and producers. On September 16, 1932, the 24-year-old climbed the Hollywood sign under cover of darkness. She left her coat, purse, and a heartbreaking note that read, "I am afraid I am a coward. I am sorry for everything. If I had done this a long time ago, it would have saved a lot of pain." She then climbed to the top of the letter H and jumped 50 feet to her death, becoming the first and most famous person to die at the iconic landmark. The irony was devastating and cruel. Days after her death, a letter arrived at her home offering her the lead role in a Beverly Hills Playhouse production about a woman who kills herself. Antwistle had become the embodiment of Hollywood's cruelty, a talented woman destroyed by an industry that promised dreams but delivered nightmares. Her ghost is still reportedly seen near the sign, forever trapped between ambition and despair. The Hollywood sign, once a symbol of dreams, became a monument to the price of fame that nobody talks about. Number 6. Mickey Rooney. The eternal teenager's career was nearly destroyed when he defied MGM by marrying Ava Gardner against Louis B. Mayer's direct orders, proving that even the studio's biggest moneymaker wasn't safe from executive revenge. Mickey Rooney was Hollywood's most profitable star in the early 1940s, the energetic performer who embodied American optimism in the Andy Hardy films that made MGM millions, when he fell hard for Gardner in 1942. Studio chief Mayer absolutely forbade the marriage, knowing it would destroy Rooney's wholesome image and hurt the franchise that was keeping the studio afloat during wartime. Mayer summoned Rooney to his office and laid down the law. "You will not marry that girl. She's nothing but trouble. and you're too valuable to waste on some nobody from North Carolina. But Rooney was head over heels in love and married Gardner anyway in a secret ceremony, sending Mayer into a rage that would define the rest of Rooney's career. The studio head's revenge was swift and brutal, systematically destroying Rooney's career by putting him in inferior films and reducing his screen time. When Rooney complained about the poor scripts and smaller roles, Mayer reportedly told him, "You're through, you little runt. I made you and I can break you." The marriage lasted only a year, torn apart by Gardner's rising career and Rooney's drinking, but the damage to his standing at MGM was permanent. Mayer never forgave the betrayal and made sure Rooney paid for his defiance. What made it worse was that Rooney was drafted into World War II at the height of the conflict, spending 2 years entertaining troops in dangerous combat zones while his career stagnated back home. When he returned, he was too old for teenage roles, but too typecast for adult parts. MGM dropped him in 1948, and he spent decades trying to rebuild what had once been the most successful career in Hollywood. The little giant, who had commanded $5,000 a week, was reduced to nightclub appearances in B-movies, his 8 marriages becoming tabloid fodder rather than romantic headlines. Number 5. Orson Welles. The boy genius who created Citizen Kane was blacklisted by Hollywood for the sin of being too intelligent and independent, proving that artistic brilliance was actually a liability in Tinseltown. Orson Welles arrived in Hollywood in 1939 with an unprecedented contract, giving him complete creative control, but his masterpiece became his curse when it offended the most powerful man in America. Citizen Kane was a thinly veiled attack on newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst, who used his vast media empire to try to destroy both the film and Welles' career before it could gain momentum. Hearst banned any mention of the film in his newspapers, which controlled public opinion across the country, and pressured theater owners not to show it, by threatening to expose their private lives in his gossip columns. He even offered to buy all existing prints from RKO just to burn them, understanding that destroying the physical film would erase Welles' achievement forever. The campaign worked brilliantly. Kane lost money despite universal critical acclaim, and Hollywood executives decided Welles was too dangerous and expensive to employ. RKO butchered his follow-up, The Magnificent Ambersons, cutting 50 minutes from Welles' final cut and destroying the deleted footage so it could never be restored. Studio executives literally burned the missing scenes in a parking lot, eliminating one of cinema's greatest lost treasures. The message was clear: conform or be destroyed. By 1948, Welles was essentially exiled from Hollywood, forced to work in Europe just to make films, while lesser talents were handed million-dollar budgets for mediocre projects. He spent decades begging for financing, sometimes selling his own wine to fund his pictures, while the industry that should have celebrated him treated him like a pariah. The man who revolutionized cinema with deep-focus photography and innovative sound design was reduced to appearing in wine commercials and bad horror movies to pay his bills. When Citizen Kane was finally recognized as the greatest American film ever made, Welles was already dead, never having received the recognition he deserved during his lifetime. Number 4. John Garfield. The tough guy from the Bronx was crushed by the House Un-American Activities Committee when he refused to name names during the communist witch hunts, becoming a martyr to artistic integrity and political principle. John Garfield was Hollywood's original rebel, the method actor who brought working-class authenticity to the screen in films like The Postman Always Rings Twice and Body and Soul. His leftist political views and support for labor unions made him a target when HUAC began investigating Hollywood in 1947, looking for communists under every rock in Tinseltown. Garfield was called before the committee in 1951 and faced an impossible choice that would define his legacy: betray his friends and colleagues by naming suspected communists, or be blacklisted from the industry that was his life's work. He chose conscience over career, telling investigators, "I have nothing to hide and nothing to be ashamed of. My life is an open book." The committee wasn't satisfied with his testimony and kept calling him back for more questioning, turning him into a poster boy for Hollywood resistance. The stress was literally killing him, and everyone could see it.
Garfield suffered from a weak heart, a condition worsened by years of smoking and the constant pressure of investigation and blacklisting. His friends watched him deteriorate as his career disappeared and his income vanished. Studio executives who once begged for his services now refused to return his phone calls, and insurance companies wouldn't cover films with blacklisted actors. On May 21, 1952, he died of a massive heart attack at age 39, becoming the youngest major star to die from HUAC persecution. His wife blamed the committee directly, saying, "They killed him as surely as if they had put a gun to his head. They destroyed his will to live by destroying his ability to work." Garfield's final film, He Ran All the Way, was grimly prophetic about a man trapped by forces beyond his control. The rebel who fought for the working class had been destroyed by the very system he tried to change. Number 3. Dalton Trumbo. The highest-paid screenwriter in Hollywood became its most famous exile when he chose principle over profit during the blacklist era, sacrificing his career to protect others and preserve his artistic integrity. Dalton Trumbo was earning $4,000 a week writing hits like Kitty Foyle and 30 Seconds Over Tokyo when HUAC came calling in 1947, targeting him as one of the most dangerous communist sympathizers in the film industry. As one of the Hollywood 10, he refused to answer questions about Communist Party membership and was sentenced to a year in federal prison for contempt of Congress. The blacklist that followed was devastating and total. Trumbo was banned from every major studio and forced to sell his beloved ranch, moving his family to Mexico, where living costs were cheaper and the political climate less hostile. For over a decade, he wrote scripts under fake names like Robert Rich and Sam Jackson for a fraction of his former salary, winning Oscars for Roman Holiday and The Brave One that he couldn't even claim publicly. The Academy didn't acknowledge his authorship until 1975, long after the damage was done and his career was essentially over. During the blacklist years, he worked from a small office in his garage, churning out B-movie scripts to support his family while watching his reputation disappear. His wife Cleo took a job as a photographer to help pay the bills, and the family lived in constant fear of financial ruin. What made Trumbo's exile particularly cruel was his extraordinary talent. Even blacklisted, he was still Hollywood's best writer, crafting brilliant scripts that producers desperately wanted but couldn't officially buy. He became a ghostwriter for his own career, watching lesser talents take credit for his work while he struggled to support his family. The blacklist began to crack in 1960 when Kirk Douglas insisted on crediting Trumbo for Spartacus. But by then, he had lost his most productive years to political persecution. The writer who chronicled American dreams had become living proof of how quickly those dreams could turn into nightmares. Number 2. Judy Garland. The Girl Next Door was systematically destroyed by the studio system that created her, turning America's sweetheart into a tragic figure of addiction and despair whose death became Hollywood's greatest shame. Judy Garland was just 16 when MGM began controlling every aspect of her life, forcing her to take amphetamines to stay thin and barbiturates to sleep in a pharmaceutical nightmare that would define her entire career. Studio chief Louis B. Mayer treated her like valuable property rather than a human being, once slapping her and calling her "my little hunchback" when she gained weight during filming. The prescription drug cycle that started in her teens never ended, creating an addiction that destroyed her health and sanity. By the 1940s, Garland was chronically late to sets, unreliable, and emotionally unstable, but MGM kept pushing pills on her to maintain their investment. Her multiple attempts at rehabilitation failed because the studio needed her working, not recovering. When she suffered a nervous breakdown during the filming of Annie Get Your Gun, MGM finally dropped her in 1950 after she was hospitalized for cutting her throat with broken glass. The studio that made millions from The Wizard of Oz and the Andy Hardy series discarded its biggest star like damaged goods, refusing to pay for her medical treatment or acknowledge their role in her destruction. Garland was left bankrupt and broken, her career in ruins and her health permanently damaged by years of studio-sanctioned drug abuse. Garland's later years were a series of desperate comebacks, punctuated by breakdowns, overdoses, and financial disasters that made headlines around the world. Her legendary comeback performance at Carnegie Hall in 1961 proved she still had the magic, but the damage was irreversible.
She died in 1969 at age 47 from an accidental overdose, weighing just 90 pounds and owing hundreds of thousands in taxes and medical bills. The rainbow that she sang about so beautifully had led her over a cliff into darkness. Her daughter Lisa Minnelli later said that MGM didn't just destroy her mother's career, they destroyed her life by turning her into an addict before she was old enough to understand what was happening. Number 1. Marilyn Monroe. The ultimate blonde bombshell was crushed between her manufactured image and authentic self until the pressure literally killed her, becoming the most tragic victim of Hollywood's star-making machine. Marilyn Monroe was the most famous woman in the world in 1962, but behind the breathless voice and platinum curls was Norma Jean Baker, a damaged woman desperate to be taken seriously as an actress and a human being. Her affairs with John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert made her a national security risk, while her demands for better roles and higher pay made her a liability to the studios that created her. When Monroe was fired from Something's Got to Give in 1962 for chronic absences and erratic behavior, it effectively ended her career at its peak. Fox blamed her for the film's massive cost overruns and sued her for breach of contract, painting her as an unreliable drug addict who couldn't be trusted with major productions. The woman who had once commanded $1 million per picture was suddenly unemployable, her reputation destroyed by whispers of mental instability and unprofessional behavior that followed her everywhere. The pressure of being perfect was crushing her spirit and destroying her sanity. Monroe was trapped in a character she could never escape, forced to play the dumb blonde even in private moments when she wanted to discuss literature and politics. She studied method acting with Lee Strasberg, hoping to transform her image, but directors only wanted the wiggling, giggling bombshell that made them money. On August 5, 1962, Monroe was found dead in her Brentwood home from an overdose of barbiturates that she had been taking for years to cope with the pressure. The official ruling was probable suicide, but conspiracy theories have swirled for decades about murder, cover-ups, and missing evidence involving the Kennedy brothers and the CIA. What's certain is that the pressure of being Marilyn Monroe killed Norma Jean Baker, creating a tragedy that still haunts Hollywood today. She had become trapped in a manufactured fantasy that demanded perfection while offering no humanity, proving that even the most successful stars were just prisoners in golden cages. What do you think was Hollywood's most shameful moment? Were these stars victims of their own choices or casualties of a brutal system that chewed up talent for profit? Drop a comment and tell me which scandal shocked you most, because honestly, some of these stories make today's celebrity meltdowns look like playground drama compared to the systematic destruction of human lives that built the entertainment industry we know today.